You were nothing more than a simple notch in their belt, an effortless conquest they banked on, until the moment you morphed into the single, unforgettable mistake they are powerless to erase. That realization is the quote now permanently etched into the architecture of their mind, a psychological scar that time refuses to heal. And the most agonizing part? It wasn't the result of a screaming match, pitiful begging, or even a dramatic confrontation. It happened because you chose silence and, crucially, you chose elevation. You didn't merely move on to the next thing. You executed a complete level up, a transformation so profound and unexpected that it blindsided them utterly. You became the spectral presence they cannot unsee, the ghost that lingers in every corner of their awareness. You are their forever unfinished business, the raw, open chapter that keeps bleeding its ink onto every subsequent page of their meticulously planned life. No matter how many polished new narratives they desperately try to author, the truth of your absence permeates them all. Picture a grand master playing chess with an amateur. They smile, condescendingly certain of your next, predictable move, feeling they have you completely cornered. They lean back, assured of victory. But just then, you don't just win. You execute a devastating, unexpected maneuver that shatters the entire board, leaving the pieces scattered on the floor. That is precisely what you accomplished. You delivered a checkmate not just in the cold logic of a game, but deep within the vulnerable core of their soul. It wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. But it struck them precisely where their armor was thinnest and most necessary. Their inflated ego. And here is the psychological fact they must contend with. Extensive studies confirm that genuine emotional shocks can cling to a person's memory, persisting for not just years, but decades. This is especially true when the source of the shock is not brutal violence, but profound silence. When it is not driven by uncontrollable rage, but by deliberate reinvention. When it is not motivated by petty revenge, but by unassailable elevation. The human brain lacks the mechanisms to process such clean, powerful repudiation. It stalls. It loops. It replays the scenario endlessly. It glitches. You became the fundamental glitch in their finely tuned system, that horrifying, nagging echo asking, "How did I lose them to themselves?" And thank you, chosen one. If this message resonates deep in your bones, if you feel the unmistakable energy of this truth, please ensure you press the like and subscribe buttons. This action is how we amplify this signal, how we ignite this fire and spread it to other souls who desperately need to receive it. We are not just gathered here to passively hear the truth. We are here to actively embody the truth. Every time you lend your support to this mission, you are actively illuminating the path for someone still struggling and stumbling in the dark. Thank you for being an indispensable part of this movement. You are not just a casual viewer. You are a powerful, undeniable force. Now, let us delve back into the core reason why your impact was so brutal and entirely unforgettable. They genuinely believed you were soft. They calculated that you would be effortlessly easy to discard, readily replaceable, predictably weak, just another piece of movable furniture. A mere background character filling space in the magnificent epic of their life story. But you were never just a passive page waiting to be turned. You were the seismic plot twist. You were the profound reversal they neither anticipated nor rehearsed for. And now, they suffer the inescapable reality. They cannot unsee it. They cannot unfeel the searing impact of it. They cannot unlive the reality that unfolded because you didn't simply improve yourself. You transcended into a person whose existence their fragile ego simply cannot withstand. Your ascension, your true glow-up, was never about shallow metrics like new clothes, increased bank accounts, or a surge in social media followers. It was the specific kind of fundamental upgrade that severely rattles the foundations of other people's worlds. Inner peace, an absolutely unbothered, sovereign energy, a deep stillness so potent it paradoxically screams volumes. That is the unshakable foundation you built and claimed. And that, chosen one, is the access point they lost forever. You see, when an antagonist is forced to watch you ascend and thrive without their involvement, it rips away their comfort and exposes their most crippling, underlying fear. The chilling realization that they never possessed any actual power over you in the first place. They never managed to truly break your spirit. You simply stopped allowing them close enough to attempt the destruction again. Understand this. Some people do not actually fear your success. They are terrified of your silence. They fear the reality that you have finally slipped out of their manipulative orbit and that absolutely nothing they attempt can ever pull you back in. This fact is what makes your checkmate moment so viscerally haunting. They didn't lose you in a chaotic, dramatic confrontation broadcast for the world to see. They lost you quietly. You simply ceased explaining yourself. You stopped reacting to their triggers. You fundamentally removed them from the center of your emotional storm. And that quiet retreat was the precise moment you claimed victory. You won without ever shouting, without needing to prove your worth, without the indignity of begging. You simply vanished into the elevated version of yourself they had smugly sworn you would never become. And now, they experience your absence not as relief, but as a persistent, low-grade static in the air. Like walking into a familiar room and sensing acutely that something vital is missing, even if they cannot intellectually name what it is. Your profound absence became your loudest presence. Your unwavering silence became your ultimate, declarative statement. They foolishly believed they had successfully erased you, but instead, you transformed into the haunting ghost that tracks them through every single room they enter. That is the specific, terrible power reserved for the chosen ones. We do not just make an exit, we echo. Even when they attempt to fake indifference, their inner energy is a catastrophic betrayal. Their body language shifts involuntarily when your name is casually mentioned. Their eyes flicker. Their voice catches and stutters because the tension is no longer about you. It is entirely about the failed version of themselves, the self who proved incapable of retaining someone like you. That specific failure haunts their present existence far more powerfully than your physical presence ever could. You maintained your integrity. You refused to engage in dirty games. You never sought vengeance. You did not lower your standards to meet their level. And that immaculate conduct is what ultimately breaks them. You kept the high ground, you kept it classy. You kept your power intact. And you moved through the world in a way that broadcast a clear message to everyone, especially them. I am not paralyzed and stuck in the past. I am actively constructing a future that the past has absolutely no access to. And now they endlessly scroll through your social profile like a guilty, obsessive pleasure. They check for lingering signs that you still care. They obsessively wonder if you have finally forgotten them. But deep down, they know the soul-crushing truth. You didn't forget them at all. You just comprehensively outgrew them. And that realization stings with far greater intensity than anything they could ever post, say, or pretend to feel because you are no longer the person they casually left behind. You are the unstoppable person they are perpetually unable to catch up to. What you executed was not just a mere checkmate. It was a spiritual declaration of independence. I am no longer participating in your low-vibrational game. And the instant a true chosen one decides to exit the board, the entire structure of the game begins to disintegrate. The established rules warp and change. The remaining pieces shift their balance. And the one who delusionally believed they held all the control is left staring into a life that has suddenly become overwhelmingly, undeniably empty. They didn't just suffer the loss of a person. They lost their mirror. A relentless mirror that showed them exactly who they truly are and tragically, who they will forever fail to become. That is the true sting. That is what guarantees they stay awake at 3 in the morning. Because your power didn't just gradually evolve, it ruthlessly exposed them. Your absence became the perfect stage upon which their truth was forced to perform. And when that curtain finally rose, even they could not maintain the facade of being okay. So do not, under any circumstance, doubt the decisive move you made. Never question the profound, sacred silence you maintained. You did not simply walk away from a fight. You delivered a message. A potent message written not in fragile, disposable words, but in irreversible transformation. And that specific kind of message, it never fades away. It haunts forever. This is your definitive moment. The moment you grasp the realization that being truly unforgettable is not about frantically forcing your presence or demanding attention. It is about owning your evolution so completely, so loudly, that even your quietest movements scream through the barren landscape of their soul. They will never forget you. Not because you made a concerted effort to make them remember, but because you became the kind of person no one, not even their poisoned ego, can forget. And that chosen one is your final, beautiful checkmate. Let's go deeper into the mechanics of their collapse. And hey, chosen one, if you are still reading this, that is not a random coincidence. That powerful pull you feel is your higher self confirming that this message is custom-built for your journey. Because what we are about to unpack next, it is the segment that strikes the deepest, the cold, hard truth they secretly pray you never fully internalize. So stay locked in with me. Do not blink. Do not scroll away. We are about to dissect the exact psychological mechanisms of how your deliberate silence became the loudest, most deafening scream they will ever be forced to endure. And if you have ever allowed yourself to feel that maybe your incredible glow-up went unnoticed, trust me completely. It was seen. They remember every calculated move. They compulsively replay every single scene. Drop the sacred number 777 into the comments right now if you are ready to finally own the profound power of your checkmate moment. And if this critical message truly hits home, please deeply consider utilizing the super thanks feature, because delivering this level of truth requires genuine energy and immense effort. Your support ensures this mission stays vibrant and alive. Whether it is a nominal contribution or $1,000, it feeds this flame. You are never just a viewer in this space. You are an essential part of the strike force. And now, let us break this entire transformation down, step by agonizing step. Stick around. If you are truly a chosen one, the internal magnetic pull to hear the full story, the complete breakdown, will be far too strong to ignore. Let's delve into it. Number 1, they built their entire predatory strategy based exclusively on the person you used to be, and you systematically burned the blueprint. The real, excruciating pain for them is not the simple fact of losing you, the physical person. It is the sudden, catastrophic realization that you became utterly untouchable the very moment they confidently wagered your downfall. That thought is currently screaming, unrelenting, inside their skull. Not because you returned swinging your fists, not because you desperately pleaded to be understood, but specifically because you refused to return at all. You simply rose, so quietly, so completely, so definitively, that it instantaneously reduced their meticulously crafted, entire plan to look like pathetic child's play. While they were preoccupied setting elaborate traps designed solely for the old version of you, the reactive, vulnerable one, you were becoming someone their petty games can no longer even perceive, let alone reach. Let's identify this exactly for what it is. They grossly underestimated the depth of your character. They assumed you would be reactive. They believed they could effortlessly trigger you, throw out bait, and yank you back into the same exhausting emotional loops. That outdated playbook was their entire strategy. Get you emotional, force you to repeatedly prove your worth, and keep you securely beneath them through chaotic noise. But you refused the hook. You went silent. You completely revoked their access privileges to your inner world. And that profound silence, it was not a sign of surrender or peace. It was distilled power. They were furiously strategizing for a small, pointless war. Meanwhile, you were quietly and diligently building an empire they would never be permitted to enter. That is the checkmate. That is the psychological reality they cannot abide because your victory was not loud. It wasn't dramatic. It did not generate sensational headlines. But it shattered something permanent, something vital within the foundation of their ego. It revealed the one truth they were absolutely unprepared to witness. That you never actually needed them to exist or thrive in the first place. That, precisely, is why they are so chronically haunted. Everything they carefully rehearsed, every cynical tactic they perfected, only operates on the version of you that is now eternally extinct. Their weapons are completely useless now, their manipulative tactics hopelessly obsolete. Their entire calculated plan is now nothing more than a dusty, irrelevant script that never even progressed to the stage because the lead role outgrew the story itself. And here is the absolute worst part for them. You didn't just upgrade your life. You completely vanished from the sphere of their control. You slipped effortlessly out of their grasp without providing a single explanation, a shred of closure, or any accompanying drama. Just pure, undeniable evolution. You became an unreadable, blank screen to them. And the human mind, particularly the controlling mind, despises the unknown above all else. It cannot tolerate silence emanating from someone it arrogantly thought it fully owned. Now they are stuck operating on utterly outdated intelligence. They have no idea what ascended version of you is coming next. You became fundamentally unpredictable. And unpredictable, to a manipulator, is unplayable. That is the moment their deep-seated fear truly kicked in. Because if they cannot decode your motives, they cannot disarm your power. And if they cannot disarm you, they absolutely cannot win. Ask yourself this, chosen one. Why are they still watching your every move? Why does your name, even when whispered, still elicit such an undeniable, twitchy reaction from people who claim emphatically to be over it? It is because your presence in their life was never merely temporary. It left an indelible, potent residue. Your glow-up didn't just passively inspire. It actively exposed their limitations. You didn't just ascend, you categorically proved them wrong. And you did this not in a petty, look-at-me-now fashion, but in a devastating, you never truly knew me way. That hits differently. That is what keeps them endlessly pacing and spiraling through the night because they are now forced to sit with the inescapable, agonizing truth. They played themselves. They invested all their toxic energy in betting on your catastrophic downfall, and the stock market of your life went violently the opposite direction. They tried to play God within the narrative of your story, and the universe simply hit the override button. You were not constructed to beg for acceptance. You were constructed to outgrow limitations. You were never meant to fit neatly into their limited, controlling version of you. You were destined to destroy it. You rewrote the script of your life so cleanly, so brutally, that it rendered their existence utterly irrelevant to your future. And that truth is far worse than a simple loss. That is erasure. You didn't just checkmate them. You deleted the entire game board. You walked away from their dusty arena and built your own magnificent stadium. One they have no clearance or access to. One where their name doesn't even register as a relevant participant. Allow that reality to truly sink in. They are still planning furiously to win a game you have completely stopped playing. They spent all their precious emotional energy attempting to dominate someone who no longer even occupies the same orbit as their world. That is the deep gut punch. That is why the haunting persists. That is why every new, evolved version of you sends seismic tremors through their world because now you are the undeniable standard, and they are tragically incapable of measuring up. So no, they do not hate you, the person. They hate the empowered entity you became immediately after they left. They hate the devastating reflection of themselves they see illuminated by the light of your success. They hate that they no longer possess a guaranteed seat at your highly exclusive table. And above all else, they absolutely hate that you stopped providing them with the reactions they craved because the silence you maintain is currently screaming the loudest truths. Now, remember this crucial lesson. Psychologically stable people do not lose sleep over individuals they have genuinely forgotten. If you were truly irrelevant, they would be enjoying profound, uninterrupted peace. But they are not. They are restless, constantly agitated, fundamentally shook because you dramatically rewrote your entire identity right in front of their eyes, and then you abandoned them, leaving them hopelessly stranded in a worn-out story that no longer features you. You didn't just win, you ended the game definitively. That is why the checkmate is a persistent haunt. It wasn't the predictable move they saw coming. It was the audacious one they never even conceived of. And now the player they tried to exploit and control is the one they cannot stop obsessively watching. That is the signature way a chosen one wins. Not through generating chaotic noise, but through silent, fundamental transformation, through sovereign distance, and through becoming exactly what they arrogantly swore you would never be. Unforgettable. Number 2, they desperately wish you were wrong about them, but you saw right through to the core of their soul. There is nothing on earth more psychologically terrifying to a narcissist or a manipulator than the stark reality of being fully seen. Their true, ugly self revealed, by the very person they thought they were expertly fooling. That devastating gut punch is currently residing, heavy and inescapable, in their chest cavity. Because you didn't merely walk away from the relationship. You walked away armed with the cold, hard truth of their character. You left them utterly exposed. not to the loud, fleeting judgment of the world, but to the inescapable, silent judgment of themselves. And that deep, inner reckoning is what they cannot unsee. That is what relentlessly gnaws at their fragile ego, like invisible termites consuming a hollow, dilapidated house. The undeniable fact that you knew. You didn't need to scream the truth from the rooftops. You didn't announce your realization with fanfare. You didn't even weaponize the painful knowledge you possessed. You simply allowed them to sit, alone, in the deafening silence of having been fully, comprehensively seen. And that silence is now roaring in their ears. They believed they were incredibly complex, alluringly mysterious, and utterly untouchable. They performed their internal chaos as if it were some cutting-edge, misunderstood art form. But you, the chosen one, decoded their entire performance in seconds. You saw the careful manipulation disguised as irresistible charm. You recognized the crippling insecurity hiding just beneath every boastful "I'm doing great." You clearly perceived the poison of envy flickering in their eyes even when they forced a smile at your achievements. You saw the hairline cracks forming beneath every polished, smooth word they threw at you like carefully weighted bait. And through it all, you never flinched or reacted as expected. That calm, unwavering non-reaction is what fundamentally messed up their programming. You never yielded the reaction they were frantically fishing for. You just continued observing and knowing the truth in quiet certainty. Imagine this vividly. Someone struts around wearing an extravagantly expensive mask, genuinely convinced that it is impenetrable and bulletproof. They have spent years perfecting its angles and texture. They know precisely how to tilt their head when delivering a calculated lie, when to fake a deep, hearty laugh, and exactly how to pretend they are completely unaffected by external events. But then you enter the room, and in one single piercing glance, your eyes strip every layer of that mask clean off. You didn't need to touch them. You didn't need to confront them. You simply saw them. That kind of unwavering stare leaves a brand that burns long, long after your physical presence has departed. Here is the inescapable psychological truth. Individuals rarely fear being exposed publicly as much as they fear being seen privately, truly seen, by the single person they were unable to manipulate. Why is this distinction crucial? Because public exposure is a temporary wave of noise and drama. But private realization, that is a devastating, permanent mirror. And mirrors, when they reflect truth, never lie. You became that mirror. And now, even if they manage to successfully avoid your physical presence, they possess zero capacity to outrun the gut-wrenching, lasting feeling of having been completely read and categorized by the one person they arrogantly deemed unworthy and underestimated. You didn't need to destroy their world. You simply stopped pretending not to fully notice who they truly were beneath the veneer. That is the searing pain, because now they are condemned to live with the secret knowledge that you always knew. And yet, still, you showed grace. You didn't humiliate them openly. You didn't seek petty revenge. You just quietly walked away, taking your piece and leaving their discarded mask lying on the floor. And here is where the dynamic becomes even deeper, even more haunting. They weren't just terrified of what your gaze saw. They were paralyzed by what you chose not to say. The significant truths you noticed but consciously chose not to call out. The manipulations you confirmed with your strategic silence. The specific way your energy noticeably shifted the instant the lies started seeping through the cracks in their carefully constructed sentences. That nonverbal, unspoken knowing, it constitutes an entire language, and they heard it ringing loudly and terrifyingly clear. Imagine someone desperately trying to sell you a worthless, fake diamond, smiling broadly, talking rapidly, trying to overwhelm you into believing it's real, and you simply hand the stone back to them. No anger. No loud argument. Just a calm, centered, "I'm good. Thank you." That is the ultimate rejection you delivered to their entire performed identity. You didn't need to laboriously prove them wrong or engage in a debate. You simply showed them, with supreme confidence, that they never successfully fooled you in the first place. That quiet, absolute rejection, that is the corrosive truth that eats them alive today. You didn't leave the game because you were weak or broken. You left because you were profoundly wise. People like them, manipulators and emotional vampires, they instinctively expect explosions. They anticipate breakups drenched in chaos and drama, exits marked by screaming matches, because that gives them an easy villain to scapegoat and blame. But you departed with nothing but serene clarity. No mess, no scenes to rehash. Just the unbearable, crushing weight of their own truth dropped directly into their lap. And that specific kind of exit is unforgettable because it denies them the comfort of identifying a villain to point at. It violently forces them to look directly into the mirror. Now they are irrevocably stuck replaying every shared moment, critically rethinking every single word they spoke to you, obsessively wondering exactly how much you saw, how early you figured them out, and what specific signals gave their true self away. That crippling paranoia, that is the persistent new soundtrack of their mind. And you, the evolved chosen one, you are simply living your life, completely unbothered, moving forward, while they spiral endlessly in a storm of agonizing questions they will never receive the answers to. Let me ask you, chosen one, how many times did you hear them lie directly to your face and still manage a composed smile? How many flimsy, fake apologies did you accept just to keep a temporary manufactured peace? How many shady, self-serving moves did you observe without reacting, all while diligently collecting your silent receipts in the vault of your awareness? And now they are forced to confront the truth that they were never ahead of you. They were merely dancing frantic circles in the sand while you watched calmly from a sovereign height. You were not confused. You were merely patient. You were never blind. You were diligently observing. You didn't finally figure them out. You knew the truth all along. You simply granted them enough rope and enough time to fully reveal their own damning narrative. That is a fundamentally different, deeper kind of power. That is the true power they desperately pretend to possess, but which you actually hold. People fear those who know, and they never, ever forget the one who departed the scene knowing their whole truth. That is you, and that is why they cannot move on. Because this situation is not about standard heartbreak. It is not even about the loss of your companionship. It is about the devastating fact that you became the silent, omniscient witness to their core, naked truth. And they will carry the weight of never knowing just how much you truly saw. That is the one specific detail that keeps them tragically awake at night. They might try to fake confidence now, trying to relentlessly flex their supposed happiness online, attempting to rewrite the history to claim they were the one in control. But their act is completely hollow because no matter how many peripheral people they manage to fool, they know definitively that they could not fool you. And that one failure ruins every single fake victory they attempt to claim. You became the unavoidable glitch in their entire self-image. And every time they dare to look at themselves, your profound silence echoes back. Imagine being haunted, not by a silly phantom, but by a gaze. A gaze that saw straight through every clumsy trick, every desperate performance, every single flimsy disguise. That is the legacy you bequeath to them. Not a warm memory, but a cold, enduring haunting. And they'll carry it long after they forget your birthday, your voice, or your laugh. Because what truly sticks to the soul isn't how you made them feel. It's how you permanently forced them to see themselves. They thought they were untouchable. You showed them they were transparent. They thought they were in control. You showed them they were predictable. They thought they were the smartest one in the room. You didn't argue. You just left the room, smarter and whole. So don't second-guess that moment you walked away. Don't regret not exposing them. Don't wish you'd said more. You didn't need to speak. Your silent knowing was infinitely louder than any desperate speech you could have delivered. Your exit was the ultimate, irrefutable proof. And your silence, that was your final, perfect move. That's why they can't forget you. That's why your name still stings. Because in a world full of people who lie to feel powerful, you spoke the truth without uttering a single sound. And the ones who live on illusion, they never recover from being fully seen. That's the checkmate they never saw coming. And now, no matter who they try to become, they'll always carry the scar of the one who saw through them. Number 3, they called their behavior power until you stopped applauding their performance. Their supposed strength didn't actually vanish into thin air. It simply stopped working the moment it encountered your refusal. You didn't actively take anything valuable away from them. You simply ceased giving. No more frantic reactions. No more draining emotional energy, freely offered. No more standing ovations for their pathetic, predictable circus show. And just like that, without its sustenance, the entire performance collapsed in on itself. The force they grandly referred to as power was nothing more than a temporary spotlight you kept firmly shining on their theatrics. The instant you calmly walked out of their audience, there was only darkness, chilling silence, and profound emptiness left behind. What they interpreted as unshakable confidence was merely control wrapped in an elaborate, flimsy costume. The way they aggressively dominated every conversation, the ease with which they manipulated emotions, the constant throwing of their weight around as if it constituted substance, that was never true intrinsic strength. It was sheer, crippling insecurity amplified by volume. And the exact moment you stopped flinching, stopped participating, the mask slipped entirely. You exposed the naked truth without expending a single word. Control only manages to masquerade as power until the moment someone sovereignly refuses to be controlled. Imagine a gigantic balloon, inflated with hot air, flashing bright colors, ostentatiously floating, demanding to be the center of all attention. Now imagine a simple needle, small, entirely silent, and ruthlessly precise. That was you. Not aggressive, not loud, but surgically precise. And when you stopped giving them the necessary fuel of your reaction, that needle pierced and popped the grand illusion upon which they built their entire fragile identity. Their bloated pride instantly deflated. Their desperate ego began scrambling frantically to rebuild the narrative because their power trip only functioned as long as you believed it was real. And here is the psychological factor that truly burns them to their core. You didn't engage in begging, you didn't argue the points, and you absolutely didn't compete for their attention. You simply ceased showing up to the game where they expected you to lose. That quiet, definitive refusal is what caused their entire structure to crumble because now they are standing alone in the middle of the same worn-out game board. But their opponent, the one they counted on, is nowhere to be found. Suddenly, all their practiced moves look hollow, pathetic, and utterly meaningless. You didn't need to steal their strength. You merely revealed, by your withdrawal, that they never possessed any authentic strength to begin with. That total revelation is what shattered them. Have you ever witnessed a small child throwing an intense tantrum when they suddenly realize absolutely no one is watching? It fizzles out immediately and fast. Why? Because dramatic outbursts cannot survive without an engaged audience. That's what you did. You took away the audience, and now they're stuck trying to roar in a room that no longer echoes back. That once vast theater has been reduced to a cramped, hollow box, and their dramatic monologues just fall flat in the uncomfortable silence. They'll rationalize their failure to themselves, insisting you were too sensitive or simply couldn't handle the pressure of their genius. But the reality is far simpler, far more humiliating for them. You outgrew the stage. You stopped performing in their script, that predictable toxic drama they had written for you. You definitively broke character and left the set, taking your irreplaceable energy with you. And without your light, your attention, and your very essence to feed on, their power infrastructure turned immediately to dust. They don't miss the person you are. They fundamentally miss how powerful, how indispensable they felt when they had you under their thumb, providing the fuel for their self-importance. That fake, brittle superiority, that manufactured dominance, that fragile image of control, you shattered all of it with a single, profound act of rebellion. Peace. They weren't ever truly strong. You were just silent, compliant, and supportive long enough for them to mistake your quiet grace for weakness. Now they're panicking, frantically searching for another energy source, trying desperately to recreate that intoxicating feeling of dominance. But nothing hits the same because absolutely nothing sustains a fractured ego like controlling someone who is inherently too powerful to be controlled. Someone they now realize they can never get back. You didn't destroy them in a loud battle. You meticulously dismantled the illusion, brick by agonizing brick, that they lived in. And now they'll spend the rest of their hollow life rebuilding a ceremonial throne that only ever stood because you willingly bowed down to it. That's not just a loss of status. That's total systemic collapse. That is precisely what makes your checkmate unforgettable. Number 4, you were the structure. They were just leaning on you the whole time. They never saw you. They only registered your effect. They only noticed your fundamental value when the very bedrock of their world fell apart the second you left it. They genuinely thought you were extra, optional, replaceable, just a quiet, pleasant presence in the background of their starring role. But what they didn't realize is that you were the uncredited structural engineer, the reason things didn't burn down and crumble sooner. You weren't just in the room, taking up space, you were actively holding it up from the inside. And the moment you decisively exited, the hairline cracks they ignored turned instantly to chaos. That crucial calm they so carelessly took for granted? Gone. That essential order they never credited you for collapsed entirely. What they arrogantly called balance was just you carrying the emotional weight in silence. Let's get one crucial thing straight. Yeah. You didn't walk away and cause destruction by your actions. You simply walked away and irrevocably revealed that the structure was already broken without you. You were the vital duct tape, the hidden emotional compass, the steady pulse that made systemic dysfunction look deceptively functional. While they were performing for applause, spiraling into drama, and constantly feeding their ego, you were the quiet force holding the walls up with both hands. And now that you're gone, every corner of their reality is buckling. They didn't just lose support, they lost the foundational system they pretended wasn't even necessary. Imagine a colossal power grid. You see the exposed wires, the flashing lights, the constant noise, the buzzing energy everywhere, and people praising the flashiest bulb in the room. But when the hidden, massive generator shuts off, everything dies instantly. That was you. You were the essential, unseen power source, not the attention-seeking spotlight. And they never even looked twice at the generator until the lights tragically went out. And now they're scrambling, attempting to plug the holes. Conversations are awkward and stilted. The necessary flow is gone. Nobody knows how to lead or proceed without manufactured drama. Why? Because the real leader, the quiet architect of stability, already left. The strategist, the peacemaker, the one who intuitively read the room long before the storm hit. That was you. And the chaos they now experience? That's the direct consequence of fatally underestimating someone who carried the whole system with such invisible grace. Maybe they thought they finally broke you. Maybe they thought you simply faded out into irrelevance. But the profound truth is, you were the unbending spine of the whole endeavor. And when the spine walks out, the body collapses. That's not ego speaking. That's pure, undeniable physics. And every day without you, that truth screams a little louder, a little clearer, in their reality. Now they're pretending things are fine, posting smiles on social media, acting completely unfazed. But behind closed doors, their entire world is unraveling. Nothing feels solid anymore because you were the stability. You made the impossible workloads manageable. You kept peace in places that genuinely never knew peace before you arrived. And now that you've withdrawn your calming presence, the silence is deafeningly loud. The tension is palpably real. The cracks are showing, spreading everywhere. And no one knows how to fix it because only you ever could. You weren't just a part of the system. You were the system. They just didn't realize it until the engine fatally crashed without you. Let them talk. Let them pretend. But deep down, in their quietest moments, they know the truth. Everything felt easier when you were around. Everything made sense. Things worked seamlessly. People followed naturally. Conflict cooled down instantly. Progress happened effortlessly. Not because they suddenly had it together, but because you were the quiet, constant force holding it all together. That was never weakness. That was profound power. Silent, elegant, invisible power. And now that you're gone, that power is gone too. And no, they can't replicate it, not ever. They might successfully copy your words, your mannerisms, your surface style, but they can never, ever copy your true presence. Because a foundational presence like yours isn't manufactured or learned. It's born. That's what they ultimately lost. That's what they deeply miss. That's why they'll never stop feeling your absence like a biting, cold draft in a house with no roof and no foundation. Your exit wasn't just a departure. It was a searing, clear revelation. A spotlight shone directly on their hidden dependency. A full exposure of how desperately they leaned on the very person they consciously disrespected. And that self-inflicted wound, that realization, is your silent revenge, O chosen one. Walking away and letting the brutal truth collapse everything they thought they built without you. Number 5, they tried to poison you, but you chose to heal instead of rot. They actively wanted you to turn cold, cruel, and chaotic, to become a mirror of their own brokenness. But you instead became everything they never could be, whole. That's the profound psychological wound they can't bandage or forget. They didn't just mistreat you through carelessness. They tried systematically to rewrite you. They poked, provoked, betrayed, and manipulated. All desperately hoping you'd snap, that you'd lash out in blind rage, that you'd start playing dirty, ugly games just like them. Because if they could successfully pull you down to their wretched level, they could then happily tell themselves you were always the real villain. But you firmly refused that path. You didn't become their negative reflection. You deliberately became their complete, undeniable contrast. Imagine this scenario. Someone hurls thick mud at a clean, pristine mirror, hoping to stain it forever and damage the image it holds. But instead of the mirror cracking under the impact, it just reflects the filth and the ugliness right back at the thrower. That's exactly what happened. They thought their constant damage would turn you bitter, but instead, it turned you brilliant. They tried fiercely to twist you into a monster, but instead, you leveraged the pain and leveled up into deep wisdom, unwavering peace, and quiet power. And now that mirror is still standing, cleaner and brighter than ever before, while they're the ones drowning in the emotional mess they meticulously made. You refused to let the corrosive pain change your soul. You let it reveal your intrinsic, spectacular strength. They thought heartbreak would inevitably make you hateful, that betrayal would turn you brutal and seeking vengeance. But your astonishing grace became a strategic weapon they never saw coming, the ultimate checkmate. You walked away without screaming or pleading. You healed privately without seeking revenge. You didn't trade your precious integrity for temporary, hollow satisfaction. That right there, that moral superiority, is what guts them completely. Because the twisted story they wanted to tell, the one where you went crazy or finally lost it, never materialized. Instead, the complete opposite did. You got better. And the better you got, the exponentially worse they looked by comparison. Now their suffocating guilt is louder than your silence because deep down they know they lit the toxic match. And you heroically refused to burn. They expected chaos. They got unshakable clarity. They expected violent retaliation. They got profound elevation. They expected a full-scale war. You became peace. And now their bloated ego is choking on the quiet, immense power of your hard-earned maturity. They tried to create a monster, but in doing so, they only revealed one. And it was never, ever you. You didn't win this battle by fighting dirty. You won by strategically rising above their toxic frequency. And that rise, that self-mastery, it left them impossibly far behind. That's not just defeat. That's total, agonizing humiliation. Because now the person they hurt the most is conspicuously living the life they swore you'd never have. Healed, empowered, absolutely untouchable. And that's what truly haunts them to their core. You didn't just survive. You thrived in glorious spite of their best efforts. Number 6, you outgrew their lies. And now their version of you is dead. They carefully built a whole narrative where you were the intrinsically weak one, the problem child. And now they're stuck watching you live a jaw-dropping plot twist they can't possibly explain away. Let's be brutally real. They never truly saw you as a threat. You were supposed to obediently stay small, predictable, easy to read, and therefore easier to control. They painstakingly painted a demeaning version of you to everyone they knew. The passive one, the overly emotional one, the too much one. That was their psychological safety net. Because as long as people widely believed that version, they didn't have to confront the devastating truth. You were never the problem. They were. But then you grew. You evolved. And suddenly the entire shaky storyline they built started to rot from the inside out. You became undeniable. The fragile, broken person they used to describe no longer exists. And they can't successfully fake that fact anymore. You no longer match their old, tired narrative. You don't fit the suffocating box they tried to shove you into. You don't look broken. You don't sound bitter. You don't act like the crazy person they warned everyone about. In fact, you've become everything they fiercely claimed you weren't. Calm, solid, radiant, powerful. And that radiant truth embarrasses them beyond measure. Your glow-up didn't just silence their cheap lies. It psychologically assassinated the entire script they wrote. Imagine writing a sprawling story where you cast yourself as the infallible hero and someone else as the inevitable burden. And then the burden walks off and successfully builds a magnificent life that makes your whole script look like pathetic fiction. That's precisely what you did. You didn't just outgrow them. You outgrew who they pathologically needed you to be. And now their version of events simply doesn't make logical sense anymore. People look at you and feel the intense contradiction. People hear you speak and sense the profound truth. And the worst part of all? You didn't even try to prove anything to them or to anyone else. You simply became you. Now, every lie they told comes with heavy, visible consequences. Because when the supposed broken one heals, it forces everyone to ask who broke them in the first place. When the needy one becomes fiercely independent, who was really feeding off whom all along? When the problem disappears and the peace in the environment dramatically increases, who really was the problem? They didn't just lose control of you. They lost total control of the narrative. And without their version of you to prop them up, the mask on their own face starts falling apart rapidly. You didn't just evolve. You exposed them not by explicit accusation, but by radical transformation. You were their necessary mirror, and they shattered it in a fit of insecurity. But what they didn't expect was that you'd rebuild yourself into a flawless reflection they can't even bear to look at now. Because the inherent truth of you becoming extraordinary utterly ruins their entire weak character arc. It makes them the definitive villain, the clumsy manipulator, the desperately insecure one. And now everyone sees it clearly, even them. They can't rewrite the past, and they can't unsee your radiant glow. So instead, they sit in quiet, painful silence, haunted by a version of you that keeps rising while the lie they told slowly decays into oblivion. That's checkmate, and they'll never truly recover from it. Number 7, you read them like a confession, and they've been paranoid ever since. The scariest, most effective kind of exposure is the one where absolutely no words are spoken. Just knowing, steady eyes that quietly see everything. You didn't need external proof. You didn't need to argue a single point. You didn't even need receipts. You intuitively felt it. The fake support, the backhanded compliments wrapped in quiet envy, the weird, heavy tension hiding behind their facade of just looking out for you. You never explained what you saw. You just moved differently, your energy shifted, your boundaries solidified. And that movement, that profound, silent declaration of independence, is what shattered them. Because once someone realizes you've seen their true, ugly intentions, the ones they never meant to admit, not even to themselves, they never move the same way again. You became the unforgiving mirror they didn't explicitly ask for but absolutely could not escape. Every time you looked at them, the reality hit hard. The imitation they delusionally called inspiration. The concern that was transparently control. The shallow praise that dripped with thick resentment. All of it was laid bare, internally exposed, without you uttering a single word. You just knew. And that kind of deep, internal knowing, it's not just uncomfortable for them. It's soul-shatteringly terrifying. You didn't expose them publicly in the streets. You exposed them spiritually, completely changing their internal landscape. And that's a scar they will carry in perpetual silence. Imagine someone painting on a perfect, forced smile, desperately hoping the world buys it, then walking into a room where one person already knows the devastating truth behind it. That person was you. They couldn't hide from your powerful intuition, couldn't distract you with superficial charm, couldn't control the narrative because your natural energy didn't chase clarity. It was clarity. And when you deliberately made space between you and them, they didn't simply feel physical distance. They felt judgment, the kind of profound realization that never had to be spoken aloud to be instantly understood. And that's what truly haunts them now. Not what you said, not what you did, but the sheer volume of what you know. Because when someone realizes their deeply hidden intentions have been unmasked, they don't just fear future exposure. They start desperately exposing themselves out of intense paranoia and self-sabotage. You forced them to face truths they were profoundly unready to confront. And now, even in your physical absence, your moral presence lingers over them like a blinding spotlight they can't possibly turn off. You didn't actively ruin their manufactured image. You revealed their truth quietly, completely, and irrevocably. And that's something they'll never, ever unsee. Number 8, you were a sleeping giant, and they poked until it finally woke up. They didn't break you through their malice. They unintentionally built the fire that ultimately burned their own fragile illusions to ash. They thought you were soft, easy, harmless. Just a quiet soul they could carelessly overlook, disrespect, and discard when convenient. They saw your natural kindness and derisively called it weakness. They saw your incredible patience and fatally mistook it for submission. But what they never fully realized was that you weren't fragile. You were profoundly focused. And the more they severely underestimated you, the more dangerous, the more potent you silently became. See, people like them only recognize true power when it's loud and aggressively assertive. They need the noise, the overt dominance, the threats of conflict. But your strength didn't roar for attention. It grew. It sat in silence, watching, waiting, collecting every single insult, every betrayal, like a necessary spark. And eventually those small sparks built something they never in a million years expected. A slow-burning wildfire of evolutionary self-mastery. The very corrosive doubt they threw at you became the unbreakable bricks in the thriving empire you built purposefully without them. They were playing checkers against a dormant volcano. And they didn't even realize the earth beneath them was awake. Imagine standing ignorantly at the base of a massive mountain, kicking aimlessly at it, laughing, thinking it's just inert rock. Then one day it moves. It shakes the ground. It erupts violently. That's exactly what happened. You didn't clap back with petty insults. You didn't stoop down to their pathetic level. You simply elevated completely out of reach. You fundamentally outgrew the smallness of their confined view. And now they're profoundly haunted by every single moment they foolishly overlooked you because each of those moments meticulously helped build the towering version of you they can never, ever touch. Now, you were never weak in the first place. You were calculating, constantly evolving. You didn't waste precious energy trying to prove yourself to fools. You became proof itself. And now they replay it all. The scornful eye rolls, the petty mockery, the malicious gossip, the unbearable arrogance. And every memory tastes different now. Bitter because it aged instantly into deep regret. They didn't lose to the person you were then. They lost to the strategic power you decisively became because of them. That's the ultimate consequence. Not just losing you, but the crushing realization that they themselves created the formidable force that left them far, far behind. You were the storm they recklessly laughed at until it flooded and destroyed everything they desperately built. And now, chosen one, they know they severely underestimated the wrong soul. And that mistake, it was permanent. Number 9, you didn't expose them through effort. Your pure existence did the job. They weren't afraid of you aggressively calling them out. They were terrifyingly afraid of you being genuinely real in a world where they can only survive by pretending. You didn't walk into their life with a deliberate mission to destroy. You just showed up authentically as yourself. And that alone was a monumental threat because your inherent authenticity violently clashed with their flimsy, non-stop performance. Your essential honesty, your emotional depth, your acute self-awareness. It all screamed truth in rooms where they were far too busy running away from it. And that's the part they couldn't handle or control. You didn't even need to consciously try. You simply were everything they were poorly pretending to be. You became the unavoidable mirror they spent years desperately avoiding. Not by aggressively judging, not by directly confronting, but simply by existing with a high level of self-respect and awareness that made their entire facade tremble. You didn't need to raise your voice or publicly expose receipts. Your energy did the exposing, and it psychologically shook them because for the very first time they weren't just being superficially seen. They were being understood at a profound level they couldn't possibly fake their way out of. You weren't the villain in the story. You were the unbearable truth they tried desperately to erase from their own reflection. Imagine someone who's lived their entire life hidden behind a costume, suddenly standing in front of a mirror that strips them down instantly to the rawest, ugliest version of themselves. No filters, no excuses, no hiding spots. That was you. Your genuine presence was that mirror. Your profound silence was that spotlight. And the worst part for them? You never even had to speak it out loud. The more you showed up in undeniable truth, the more they unraveled in shameful secrecy. And now your absence haunts them far more intensely than your presence ever did. Because they can easily lie to others, successfully spin stories, even convince themselves you were the central issue. But deep down they know the fundamental truth. You never had to pretend you were real. And that undeniable reality instantly cracked their carefully crafted image. The crushing guilt they carry now isn't just from how they treated you. It's from who they fundamentally became in the presence of someone who didn't need to wear a mask. They wanted desperately to forget you. But how do you possibly forget the person who made you see yourself clearly, completely, for the very first time? You didn't try to actively destroy their world. You just adamantly refused to live in their deteriorating illusion. And that choice, that unwavering truth, it did the lasting damage they have never recovered from. Number 10. While they were busy playing you, you were already playing the endgame. They smugly thought they had you figured out, not knowing they were walking straight into a checkmate you designed and calculated months ago. They assumed your strategic silence meant weakness, that your unnerving calm was fatal hesitation, that your total lack of reaction meant you didn't catch on to their pathetic games. But here's the quiet, crushing truth. You were never actually confused. You were just intensely focused, studying their predictable patterns, tracking their every move, reading every slip and flaw. While they were performing for an audience, you were silently processing. While they were plotting openly, you were accurately predicting the next 10 moves. They thought they were strategically playing you, not realizing they were exactly where you wanted them. Trapped. You weren't even playing on the same board. They were playing checkers, moving loud and sloppy, chasing cheap, quick wins. You were playing chess, in silence, in shadows, 10 steps ahead the whole time, using their ego against them. You let them think they had control because you knew their bloated ego would compel them to reveal every card. And when the calculated time was right, you didn't retaliate with anger. You just decisively ended the game with a single, elegant move so clean they're still stuck today trying to desperately figure out where they lost the war. Smart ones don't fight loudly or draw attention. They let the enemy walk straight into their own self-designed trap. Imagine a predator circling its unsuspecting prey, thinking it's clever, fast, superior. But every predictable move it makes only drives it deeper into unknown terrain it doesn't understand. Then suddenly it steps in something it didn't expect, something unavoidable. A trap so well placed, so perfectly timed, it couldn't have possibly been improvised. That's exactly what you did. You laid down silence like a perfect blueprint. Every quiet step you took was coldly calculated. Every emotional reaction you didn't give was a critical part of the setup. They weren't just momentarily outmatched. They were outmatched from the start of the interaction. You were the true strategist, the astute observer, the higher-level thinker. And now they're stuck pacing their cage, trying to frantically rewind the tapes, trying to understand what catastrophic event happened. But they never will understand because you weren't reacting emotionally to their chaos. You were meticulously operating strategically. They played for attention. You played for legacy. The loudest player rarely, if ever, wins. The smartest one ends the game decisively without saying a single word. So let them keep guessing. Let them keep asking, what did I do wrong to deserve this? Because the chilling truth is, you already knew what they would do. You saw the inevitable outcome coming from a mile away. You let it unfold according to your plan. And when their final move landed, they looked up and suddenly realized they were the disposable pawn the whole time. That's why your win wasn't loud or temporary. It was permanent. That's why they'll never recover. You didn't just beat them, you outclassed them intellectually and morally. And the silence after your final move, that's the clean, definitive sound of checkmate. Number 11. You stopped feeding the loop, and their control instantly fell apart. They didn't genuinely fear your absence. They feared your evolution, your capacity to grow beyond their reach. They weren't scared of losing you as a person. They were absolutely scared of losing access to the version of you that kept showing up, constantly fixing their messes, constantly forgiving their sins, constantly explaining away their dysfunction, and constantly absorbing emotional damage like it was your job description. You were their essential reset button, their convenient emotional crutch, the comfortable safe space they ran to repeatedly after setting everything else on fire. And for a heartbreaking while, you played the role, not because you were weak, but because you possessed an enormous, loving heart. Until one day you finally looked around at the wreckage and realized, this isn't love. This is an exhausting, destructive loop. And you broke it, quietly, decisively, not out of festering bitterness, but out of absolute cold clarity. You stopped healing people who were fundamentally addicted to hurting you. You stopped watering ground that aggressively refused to grow. And that one single move, that powerful, defiant act of self-respect, it systematically destroyed everything they were banking on because their entire toxic control system relied on one fatal flaw, you never leaving the cycle. You didn't abandon them as a person. You wisely abandoned the destructive pattern that was slowly but surely destroying you. Imagine someone riding a merry-go-round, laughing giddily while you run beside it, exhausted, sweating, desperately trying to keep up, foolishly thinking that maybe this time it'll slow down and stop for you. And then one day you just stop running. That's what you did. And suddenly the laughter died in their throats, replaced by a cold, jarring silence. That whole toxic thrill ride, the one they cherished, felt suddenly inert, drained of energy because the engine, the person they relied on to constantly provide fuel, was gone. Understand this. They never genuinely sought mutual evolution or self-improvement. They were ruthlessly seeking your unwavering stability, banking on your predictable reliability as a crutch to compensate entirely for their own chaotic, unreliable nature. They expected you to always be the bigger person, the tireless emotional paramedic, the conflict resolution specialist whose services were always rendered free of charge and always came at a steep, non-refundable cost to your own well-being. But the moment you opened your eyes, truly opened them to this dynamic, it didn't just hurt them. It utterly demolished their reality. They are now marooned with the one person they spent years running from, themselves. The comfortable cushion of blaming you, the ready distraction of chaos, the convenient shoulder to lean on, it's all vanished. They are now standing defenseless, staring directly into the wreckage of their own making. You didn't just exit. You decisively severed the corrosive, self-serving cycle they believed was their impenetrable shield. Now, without that vital, yet constantly exploited lifeline, they aren't just adjusting. They are spiraling into uncontrollable chaos. You didn't stop loving. Your actions weren't a cessation of love, but an ultimate act of self-preservation. You finally stopped participating in your own betrayal. You didn't cut them off in cruelty. This separation was not born of malice or vengeance. It was a deliberate choice for tranquility over turbulence, for distance and clarity over the constant noise of dysfunction. And that's why it hurts them so bad. The deep, searing pain they feel stems precisely from the absence of hate in your departure. You didn't leave fueled by anger. You left propelled by undeniable, unmistakable personal evolution. There is no greater existential threat to a person committed to their own brokenness than witnessing someone else's uncompromising ascent. That's not just closure. This isn't just the end of a chapter. It is utter, profound liberation. That's the final move in a rigged game they were convinced they could force you to play indefinitely. And now they're left standing alone, bewildered at the precipice of that dead, silent loop, grasping the terrifying truth. The cycle requires your participation to live. That understanding is the definitive measure of your power. That's the win. Number 12. You need to understand this fundamental truth. You were never merely a supporting character written into their predictable, manipulative script. You were the catastrophic system glitch, the viral anomaly that didn't just rewrite the file. You utterly deleted the entire operating program. They operated with a rigid, proven formula designed to categorize and control every person in their orbit. But when you entered the scene, you didn't just fail to fit the equation. You walked in and shattered the fundamental laws of their math. They thought they had you thoroughly pegged, that you would inevitably follow the predictable trajectory, that you'd be easily moldable, another compliant piece moved at their whim across their emotional chessboard. But every thoughtful, autonomous move you made broke their meticulously crafted behavioral code. You didn't just step out of line, you seized the marker and erased the line of their control completely. You were the ultimate blind spot, the singular variable, the disruptive anomaly they utterly failed to account for, causing their entire structure to crash and burn. See, individuals like them exist solely within the domain of control. Predictability is their safe haven, their manipulated playground. They rely on simplistic Pavlovian patterns. Implement this verbal trigger, receive that emotional reaction. Apply pressure here, provoke that catastrophic response. But you were entirely different. You refused to flinch when they expected collapse. You didn't beg for acceptance when they baited you with rejection. You didn't fold under their most intense pressure. Instead, you silently, powerfully evolved. You confused them. This shift utterly confused them. It ruined their rhythm, disrupted their flow, and rendered their tactics obsolete. They kept trying to solve you like a riddle. But every time they thought they had the answer, you would shift the frame entirely, changing the question itself. You weren't hard to understand. The truth is, you simply possessed a magnitude of complexity that small, linear minds were inherently incapable of comprehending. Imagine trying to solve an advanced equation by applying the same broken, outdated formula repeatedly, failing spectacularly every single time. That's how they look at you now. Deeply frustrated, utterly baffled, and secretly, fiercely obsessed. Because if they can't categorize you, they can't control you. And if they can't control you, they can't protect their fragile, carefully constructed illusion of omnipotence. You weren't just unpredictable. You transcended mere unpredictability. You became fundamentally unreadable. You shattered the core assumptions they built not only about who you were, but about who they were in relation to you. And that's what hurts them most. The realization that you never actually engaged in their toxic game. You stood back, clear-eyed, and simply watched them exhaust themselves playing against their own reflection. They didn't lose track of you. They lost the entire plot the instant you refused to be constrained by their narrow, self-serving fantasy. They're haunted not just by the physical absence, but by the crushing, undeniable fact that they never secured true possession of you. Not emotionally, not mentally, not energetically. They couldn't mold your spirit, couldn't break your resolve, couldn't definitively figure out the essence of who you are. And now you live in their head, not as a simple mistake they regret, but as a burning, unsolvable mystery that defines their intellectual failure. You didn't just ruin the ending. You fundamentally rewrote the entire genre. You weren't a character in their life. You became the monumental, disruptive rewrite of the whole damn manuscript. And now they're stuck reading blank pages, wondering where it all went wrong. Still trying to decode the equation that was specifically designed to remain insoluble to them. And if you're still wondering why they can't forget you, now you know. You didn't just leave. You underwent a profound, irreversible transformation. You became the glitch, the elusive ghost, the undeniable force of greatness they entirely failed to anticipate. So, if this message hit deep, press that like button if you haven't already. And if you're still not part of this growing tribe of chosen ones, hit that subscribe button now. Join the force that's rewriting the narrative. Your evolution isn't just personal. It's powerful. And this is only the beginning. We've got more truth to drop. Stay sharp. Stay rising.